This video shows the forecast growth option of the application. The vibe coding part was to ask ChatGPT to provide me a method which will return forecast for a data table that has a date-time column, a numeric column, and a column containing the item for which I want to generate the forecast. Since my backup history result set is not suitable, I had to take some row and create an input result set that can be used for this exercise. But usually companies track growth history for different things to SQL Server, so you can forecast growth later on. There are some companies which might not do that, but you might still want to have a forecast growth feature because half, if not more, of the OLTP databases in real world have a date-time column, which you can use to find the number of rows inserted in each month, and you can rough estimate based on the row size how much space you might need for that table rows in the next X weeks. There are other examples, but the video shows backup history data. The math behind was not checked. What I did was to add graphical control for input, which allows the method to provide an answer as accurate as possible. As you can see, when you decide to forecast growth, you are asked to select a cell in the data table and choose if cell value or cell column header is the item for which you want the forecast. Since forecast requires specific intervals for generating the forecast, you need to provide also the interval at which the data you provide as input for forecast was obtained. The method is checking all date-time columns in the data table, and it's checking the intervals for the rows, and if the interval detected is same with the interval provided, then it goes further. If the item selected for forecast is cell value, this means the value itself is in another column, which is why you are asked to provide the name of the column that contains the value. In our case, backup size MB column. At this point, the input available options and the method logic is not informing the user if the input data table or the rows are unique. In my example, at some point you see that for bar-rep database I generate forecast, although I have data for same database name, but for another SQL Server instance. Well, this is not right, and my method should contain logic to check if the data obtained is usable, and if not, to let user know that forecast will not be accurate unless a filtering will be enforced first that will clean the data or provide only the right data. What I tried to show with this video is that vibe coding still requires the person using it to forecast all possible scenarios and to provide either enough input controls or window messages with options that filter the input data to what is only needed for the forecast. I never used Copilot or Claude or other vibe coding tools, and I don't know what I just explained until now could have been generated flawless, but there will always be build test cycles, and these cycles, regardless of your computer performance, are still taking from 1 minute to 5 depending on what you test, which means there are still hours and hours spent only by building the application. At some point at the end of the video, when I animate the chart for months, the line chart last value drops to 0, and this is something else that I have to look into. In conclusion, vibe coding is not a walk in the park yet. It is saving you for all the math behind generating a forecast. If the math is good, and you can check the math yourself, which is harder at this age compared with what it used to be 35 years ago.